Rohan, sometimes I feel very frustrated because even though I understand English when I read books, watch movies, or listen to teachers, when it comes to actually speaking in English in front of people, my mind suddenly becomes blank and I start feeling nervous, confused, and afraid of making mistakes, which stops me from expressing my thoughts clearly.
I completely understand what you are feeling, Ananya, because I used to face the same problem for a very long time, where I knew the words, I understood the grammar, but when someone asked me a question in English, I either replied in very short sentences or switched to my mother tongue because I was scared of sounding wrong or foolish.
Exactly, that fear of making mistakes is the biggest problem because whenever I try to speak, I start thinking too much about grammar, sentence structure, pronunciation, and whether people will laugh at me, and because of all this overthinking, I end up saying nothing at all.
That is a very common issue among English learners, but the most important thing you need to remember is that speaking English is a skill, just like riding a bicycle or swimming, and no one becomes perfect without falling, failing, and making mistakes many times.
I know that logically, but emotionally it is very difficult to accept, especially when I see people around me speaking English fluently and confidently, because it makes me feel inferior and less capable, even though I know that everyone starts from zero.
Trust me, those fluent speakers you admire today were also beginners at some point in their lives, and the reason they speak confidently now is not because they never made mistakes, but because they spoke regularly without caring too much about perfection.
So, according to you, what is the first step I should take if I really want to improve my English speaking skills and start talking confidently without feeling scared all the time?
The first and most important step is to stop waiting for perfection and start speaking with whatever English you already know, because fluency does not come from knowing everything, but from using what you know again and again in real life situations.
That sounds simple when you say it, but when I open my mouth to speak, my heart starts beating fast, my hands become cold, and I suddenly feel that everyone is judging me, even though no one has actually said anything.
That nervousness happens because you are not used to speaking English out loud, so one very effective method is to practice speaking alone, where there is no fear of judgment, by talking to yourself in front of a mirror or describing your daily activities in English.
Talking to myself sounds a little strange, but I guess it makes sense, because when no one is listening, there is less pressure and more freedom to experiment with words and sentences.
Exactly, and when you talk to yourself, you can slowly train your brain to think in English instead of translating from your native language, which is a major reason why many people struggle to speak fluently.
Now that you mention thinking in English, I realize that I always translate sentences in my head before speaking, and that takes a lot of time and makes my speech slow and unnatural.
That is why you should start with simple thoughts, like naming objects around you, describing what you are doing, or expressing basic feelings in English, so that your brain gets comfortable forming sentences directly without translation.
I think another big problem for me is vocabulary, because many times I know what I want to say, but I cannot find the right English word, so I get stuck in the middle of the sentence.
Instead of stopping completely when you forget a word, you should try to explain that word using simple English, because communication is about conveying meaning, not about using perfect or advanced vocabulary.
That is an interesting point, because native speakers also do not always use difficult words, and they focus more on clarity than complexity. Exactly, and one more important thing is listening, because the more English you listen to, the more natural sentence patterns and expressions your brain will absorb without conscious effort. So, do you suggest watching English movies and series, or listening to podcasts and interviews, even if I do not understand everything completely?
Yes, absolutely, because you do not need to understand every single word, and instead you should focus on how sentences are formed, how words are pronounced, and how emotions are expressed through tone and body language.
I often pause movies to look up meanings of words, but sometimes it breaks the flow and makes me lose interest.
In the beginning, it is better to watch with subtitles in English, not in your native language, so that you connect spoken words with written words, and gradually your listening and speaking will improve together.
One thing I really struggle with is pronunciation, because I am never sure whether I am pronouncing a word correctly, and that makes me hesitate before speaking.
Pronunciation improves naturally with listening and repetition, so you can copy the way native speakers speak by shadowing, which means listening to a sentence and repeating it immediately in the same tone and speed.
That sounds like a very practical technique, and I think it will also help me gain confidence, because I will know that I am speaking correctly.
Confidence grows slowly with practice, and you should also remember that people usually appreciate effort, and most of the time they are not judging you as harshly as you think they are.
I guess I am my own biggest critic, and I create fear in my own mind before anyone else even reacts.
That is true for many learners, and one way to overcome this fear is to speak English with supportive friends or in small groups where mistakes are accepted and learning is encouraged.
Talking to you right now in English itself feels like good practice, and I can already feel that my fear is slowly reducing.
That is the power of regular conversation, because the more you speak, the more comfortable you become, and soon English starts feeling like a natural part of your personality instead of a subject you are studying.
Listening to you has made me realize that learning to talk in English is not about memorizing rules, but about building habits, confidence, and consistency over time.
Exactly, and if you speak English every day, even for 10 or 15 minutes, without worrying about mistakes, you will definitely see improvement within a few months.
Thank you, Rohan, for explaining everything so patiently and clearly, because now I feel motivated and less scared, and I am ready to start my English speaking journey with a positive mindset.
You are most welcome, Ananya, and remember that fluency is not a destination but a journey, so enjoy the process, keep speaking, keep learning, and never let fear stop you from expressing yourself.
After talking with you for such a long time, I finally understand that learning how to talk in English is not about being perfect from the beginning, but about speaking regularly with confidence, patience, and a willingness to improve step by step without being afraid of mistakes.
Yes, Ananya, when you accept that mistakes are a natural and important part of learning, English stops feeling like a difficult subject and slowly becomes a useful tool that helps you express your thoughts, feelings, and ideas more freely in everyday life.
I also realize now that practicing daily, listening carefully, thinking in English, and using simple words can slowly build fluency and confidence, even if progress feels slow at first.
Exactly, and when you stay consistent and positive, English speaking improves naturally over time, turning fear into confidence and hesitation into clarity.
I feel motivated and hopeful now, because I know that with regular effort and the right mindset, I can truly become a confident English speaker.
And that belief itself is the strongest step toward fluency.